This is the Word Traction Podcast, the Thursday feature, which is Corrupt Connections, where every week we find some particularly dastardly deed done by somebody in our universe and give them throw a little shade, or sometimes a vicarious appreciation. If they did such an amazing job, you just have to, you have to stand up and say, "You, sir, or madam, are good at your game." Not making light of the fact that corruption is injurious on many different levels, as we talk about frequently. Excuse me. It's there is a corrosive effect to corruption, and we're seeing it like never before. Well, never before in the executive branch of the U.S. government. It is, and because we're in 2026, and the numbers are going to be bigger because whatever was going on in prior administrations would have paled in comparison in an inflation adjusted dollar amount. But what Trump is doing is completely blowing it out of the water, and he's doing it right in front of our faces. To What is his ultimate motive? We know that he's declining. We know that the Supreme Court gave him a qualified impunity for forever stamp of approval on his forehead. We'll find out whether he's right about that, because I know there are a number of people, not least of which myself, who will delight in figuring out ways to break through that feeling of impunity. But that's not today. I guess today I'm going to start this, and some of these will be recaps of subjects we've touched on before, because there are some massive episodes in places other than our own. First and foremost, our dear friends in Ukraine. I celebrated Ukraine, its people, its president, again yesterday in some posts. He has a profound problem with corruption there. The difference is he's standing up, calling it out for what it is, naming names, bringing in the judiciary, prosecuting them. He's going full Monty on the corruption. Now, that doesn't mean it's serious. How would you like if imagine how Mr. Zelensky is sleeping every night, right? He's got his entire country on his back. He has his family. He has his own personal safety, which he seems to just blow right past that one on a daily basis. But he's keeping that machine running. Vladimir Putin has people dedicated to the task of assassinating him on a daily basis. He's got, he has, I was about to say 3 Mile Island, and that's a little bit closer to home. But he has the Russians shooting at nuclear facilities, which has its own risk involved in it. It's one thing after another. Now, again, yesterday or this morning, I guess I read of the innovations on the battlefield in the drone warfare, countermeasures, scramblers, electronic. Everything that they're doing, they are one step ahead of the enemy in everything they do, and they understand that the game on the battlefield, the game changes. You don't update at the end of the month and at the end of the year and get together and have coffee. But these fighters are innovating on an hour by hour basis. You know what works. They are in fact. It's hard to imagine that all the things that we've as a I say we that Donald Trump has done to walk away from our true allies in that fight, the champions for democracy. You know, the treasonous behavior by the Trump administration, cowardly behavior. It has made them hard as nails. They were pretty tough to begin with, and now other nations all around the world are saying we have an army, we have an entire military, our entire system, our Defense Department, not War Department, Defense Department, is built for yesterday's war. And the Ukrainians, at tremendous cost, are learning lessons on the battlefield and innovating and being adaptable and being open to new approaches. You know, this previously retired class of missile refit with a new gyroscope and better lithium ion batteries will yield better results countermanning the what are they called, the Shahed drones, which the Russians got from Iran, which the Iran stole the design from Germany. You know, I'm not saying Germany did not arm the Iranian military. The Iranian spies stole the base design for the Shahed drone and then produced it in large numbers, and now have Vladimir Putin producing them in large numbers again in Russia. Not in as large. Well, they're producing in large numbers, but they're not keeping them because Ukraine is successfully destroying them. There was a statistic I read this morning. Somebody just started up a yard tool, like a blower or something, and if it gets really annoying, I'm going to have to move. But we'll find that out. In the month of May, current month, the Ukrainians calculated that they killed 19,000 Russians or Russian troops, because we know the Russian military now uses conscripts and others from North Korea, real like meat grinder stuff from North Korea, and from several African countries. More of the yeah, it's brutal, but that it isn't Russia, which still is fighting a war of yesterday, in a way, can't innovate as quickly as the Ukrainians can. So their battlefield configurations and all are known to the Ukrainians because they've fought them for a while now. And when they have when they have infantry, Russian infantry in the field, they're being killed by swarms of drones, and there's nowhere to hide. Right? These devices, these drones, this ordnance is being trained in such a way that it's hunting and killing soldiers on the field in large numbers. That I don't know what that the not doing math on this podcast or not without a little prep, but that is something around for how many days? You know, over 1,000 killed, 1,000 Russian soldiers killed per day in the month of May, which is truly amazing. Now, what does that have to do with corruption? Well, it's Vladimir Putin, so everything to do with corruption. And Vladimir Putin, despite tremendous losses on the battlefield, continues to rack up huge amounts of money from the sale of oil, that dirty ass Ural grade oil that they have up there in Russia. but he's got plenty of it. And your boy Donald J. Trump gave him full sanctions relief, and they're starting to be, they're screaming from the cheap seats even in Congress now, like, hey, DJT, what the fuck? Sanctions relief, all that. They don't know. They may suspect, but they don't know that Trump is actually, working for Putin in a lot of ways. But, that doesn't really matter. Right now, Putin is replenishing his bank accounts to such an extent that it's embarrassing during a war. The Iranians are doing some of that, but they're taking, they've been taking a lot of shots, and they are constantly being hunted by the U.S. and more directly by Israel. So, yeah, it's Putin. I usually do at least one Putin-related Putin cast, a Putin cast every week, because the level of corruption and the shady shit that he does is worthy of note, if not celebration. But all he's been doing now, I mean, think about the workload. Right? Running a war, running an intelligence operation inside the United States government, planning for German state elections. And as I pointed out before, did he lose an election in Hungary? Sure. Did he have a grievance and kick and scream and throw Big Macs with extra special sauce against the wall of his dining room and make a butler clean it up? No. He gets back to work. That's what Putin is, the assassin that knows that you don't win them all. You just keep an iron in all of the different fires, and something's going to work out. And it's worked out okay for 25 years, because he has, in some part, recreated the Russian Empire. Right? So that ain't nothing. It ain't great for us. It ain't great for Europe. But as far as one man's accomplishments, there's something there. And we know that he no days off, right, for Vladimir. He's not the Trump since he returned to office. We'll call it, what is it? 4 months, 412, 3, yeah. So let's say 480 days since he's been back in office. I'm just making that up. That he has been golfing for 200 of those. Right? And so we've been military buildup. We've been in the Venezuela operation. We've been in Iran. Americans are still starving while the Congress takes away health care and takes away SNAP benefits from starving children. And he's golfed 25% of the days that he's been in Trump 2.0. I don't hate golfers. I don't hate people that golf, even, when they're on the payroll. Ike did. Not when he was winning in Europe. Not when, Obama golfed. I'm not hating on golfers. But when you're during wartime, you're dedicating 25% of your energy, and you're 80, you got other shit to do. You got a job, you got it. You're not a king. You're not. You don't get it, but you'll get it. I mean, eventually, it'll come around to you. You'll have an epiphany, I'm sure. Your father will come back to you in visions of of white robes and hoods, and whisper to you at night and say, "Donnie, you ain't doing so good, kid. Tighten the fuck up." So, Yeah. So let's see. We had a little spit on Ukraine. Then we went by Vladimir Putin. Trump. I'm not gonna. You've been getting assailed every single day with stories about Trump, Todd Blanche, 1.776 billion because he was kind enough to dismiss his suit, and he's going to use your money, but only 1.8 billion of it to reward people loyal to him, to reward terrorists with your money, with American taxpayers' money. Now that's, indignation, anger, disgust, all appropriate, but well covered. We'll come back to it because something else will happen. The Congress is starting to make noises about, wanting to hold hearings about it, and I wish, of course, that we were the Democratic Party was in power and we could make more out of that. That ties back into the ultimate corruption story, the two that I covered last week that were. Are there elements of well, I'll just review. We had the Thomas Massey lost his election. AIPAC, Trump beat his butt fair and square. Well, they beat him, and so he's out. But of course, he has the remainder of his term to spend there, right? So there's the motivated Thomas Massey that is going to. He doesn't. He said in his final days in office, I don't dislike our president. I just don't like war. There are better things to do with my constituents' money to do this. So, Trump had a grievance and primaried him, and he won. And Trump, credit where it's due. Trump has been successful in red states, primarying those individuals that stand up and say no, because he wants to disincentivize others from taking a principled stand against him, and he'll continue to do that any way he can. We have a stretch until the midterms. A lot of things are going to be going on. Let's take a trip over to Africa. We'll talk about the Ebola virus outbreak. That is, of course, in the DNC, the Democratic DNC. That's something completely different. DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, not to be confused with Congo, and which is bordering but hasn't shown any signs of widespread infection there. But the news reporting channels are even less reliable than Fox News there, perhaps. So we know that in the DRC, and then in Zoran Mamdani's home country, Uganda, right? That there, in the aggregate, there are upwards of 500 confirmed cases of Ebola, and there have been, the death count varies, but call it 120. The fact that the incubation period, and it's kind of like it's a strange sort of phenomenon where it is a deadly disease, but without the aerosol spread. We talked about this. I think it was only yesterday that with COVID, you're coughing and sneezing, and you can transmit with the aerosol nature of that sort of transmission from a cough. The vapor that comes out of your throat, right? Your sneeze, why you always cover the things we learned in COVID. if we didn't have moms that taught us that before. Different sort of transmission, right? COVID, much more transmissible, not nearly as deadly. The this particular variant of Ebola, there's a wide range as far as the mortality rate. You know, I saw reliable numbers that were well north of 50%, which is, you know, subsequent reports 40. It's a lot. It's dangerous, right? And you're in country in DRC, and all of the resources that you once could have counted on coming from the United States. And you know, a side note here: if the Trump administration, I've talked about this before, if they said we need to cut back on X, Y, and Z because we need to help our people at home. Now, what we've learned is he's helping his children at home. He's not doing shit for the American people, and that's clear, and everybody knows it now. But if a principled president had, you know, won an election, stood in front of the American people, and had with a whiteboard behind him, said these 5 programs in the aggregate cost the American taxpayer $42.9 billion a year. For this money, we do X, Y, and Z in these 14 countries. And what I'm going to do is I'm announcing today that we're going to roll back our participation in these programs by 25% per year until the funds are, 25% of current value. I'm going to roll it back over 4 years, over the term of my presidency. And I'm telling the African public that. I'm telling our European partners that. I'm telling China that. You know, we have been carrying the lion's share of the burden for doing these things for X years at the aggregate cost of Y to the American taxpayer. Totally fair. Every country has to sit down, evaluate priorities, see what they are able to do, and then put their programs together and execute. I mean, that's 101 stuff. And that would have been the humane, adult, proper way of handling something like that, right? They would have had time to plan. They would have not depended on those resources, which have been in place for decades. And you would hope that other countries have stepped back too, because permission structure, Donald J. Trump, and corrosive effect of corruption. But for other reasons too. China, as we talked about, is not as big a player. They do their own version of aid. Most of it is in the form of loans as opposed to direct aid. And that's fine too. I mean, you lead a country, you rate your priorities, and you go out and you execute. That's perfectly fair. Trump did none of that. He slashed these programs, and then the jelly donut of corruption within all of the suffering and all the people. Ebola is going to happen, and people are going to die until there is a vaccine for it. And then the vaccine is produced in sufficient volume to get it in the arms of all the people that need it. We're missing on a lot of that, and now we're going to miss 17 million more children in other preventable diseases because of Trump's mishandling of the WHO cuts, the USAID cuts, and all the rest of them. Right? That's going to happen. There isn't enough time or the will perhaps of other people to get involved, but we made a decision, the direct result of that decision, or Trump made it for his people, to cut the aid that will result in, with those 17 million fewer doses, there's going to be 1 to 2, it's a wide range, 1 to 2 million preventable deaths just during his term. Right? So that is under the darkest part of elections have consequences. Right? But the what I call the jelly donut, the unexpected surprise from a corruption point of view, is there are still there's 12 or 13 billion dollars sitting in a few accounts at the State Department that were related to USAID, money not yet dispersed to WHO, and money not yet dispersed to some programs that Trump actually partially kneecapped in his first administration. There's some mismanagement to go all around, some blame to throw on Biden, which will probably delight Trump, horrible person that he is. But there is this huge amount of money that is now earmarked for the cost of winding down these programs that we have eviscerated. What you would have to believe then, if you think that money that was earmarked for particular purposes will be spent in a responsible way, is you would have to think that there is a leader at the helm who is not corrupt and is not apt to take things for his own self-enrichment. All evidence to the contrary within the past 48 hours. So there's, not 1.776 billion that Todd Blanche and Trump are playing around with. And part of that is, the reason that he does that, it's part of his strategy. When he makes an announcement, these tariffs are going to bring in trillions of dollars. They never were. They never will. They never can. But he knows that the T, the M for million, B for billion doesn't have as much bang for the buck anymore, because we have a freakazoid Tesla founder, or not founder, or owner, that is now going to be valued. His net worth is going to be $1 trillion in about 15 minutes. With the SpaceX IPO and other high valuations on all of Elon's other adventures, his wireless, his satellite cell system, SpaceX, his robots that are going to be taking over our lives in not in 15 minutes, but in a year and 15 minutes. That'll happen, and he will have a net worth north of $1 trillion. So you need to use big numbers to shock and amaze the people in the MAGA cult that will never have any direct financial benefit, although Donald Trump has sold them on the lie that they too can participate in his form of the American dream, which is to screw your customers and accumulate a lot of wealth with the help of the bankruptcy code. It will never happen for any of these people, and that was the bill of goods that was sold to the MAGA base to get them to come back for this latest victory, was built on the same flimsy bullshit that Vladimir Putin constructed for Trump 1.0. But Trump sold it. Biden, had health issues, and we had the Kamala, 100 days and 15 minutes, whatever that was, and a little bit of juice in the electorate and social in the elections and social media reach. And DJT got a narrow victory, and he's our president. So we're dealing with it. Yeah. So all right. So we got Putin, we got Zelensky, we got Trump sub Ebola, we got Trump sub 1776 Todd Blanche. That's a pretty good haul. There was one other little delightful nugget that was floating around out there, and I'm gonna just spin my wheel for a second and see if no. Well, oh no, oh excuse me, please, pardon me. What we talked about yesterday or the day before in Israel. We spoke about this is corruption, cruelty, but it is given the oxygen it needs to breathe and thrive by Benjamin Netanyahu. And we're talking about Ben Gvir and less so Smotrich. There were these. There were folks coming from around the world in boats, flotilla, to bring supply some medicine and food for those that are starving to death in Gaza, because against all international norms, the strictures of the UN, the threats from the ICC, etc., Israel is still fucking with just basic life aid, water, food. We're not even talking about the materials necessary to rebuild the flattened city. We're just talking about food, water, medicine, right? Israel is still effing around with that, right? So that's where you've heard. And it hasn't been, the ICC is, they don't advertise, say, we're about to indict this person, because where's the margin in that for them? Nothing, Duterte is finding out that the ICC is for real right now, and they just indicted one of his leading right hand men, and they're going to try to get him into the Hague too, who is responsible for dozens and dozens of deaths by torture and such things. So back to Ben Gvir. So what Israel did with this flotilla in international waters, they captured them, brought them on shore, had them in a warehouse, bound their hands behind their back, made them kneel and put their face to the floor, took pictures of them, and then played the Israeli national anthem to entertain them while they were being humiliated directly by Ben Gvir, who was gallivanting his fat fucking body around in between these protesters. Now these are not terrorists. These are protesters trying to get relief supplies to starving people in Gaza. And then Israel, through the bad offices of one Bibi Netanyahu, says, I don't understand why the world says we're guilty of genocide. Right? Now, do we all know? We all know the dates. We know October 7th. We know January 6th. We know bad things happen, right? A lot of people were not killed in large numbers. Our country, our democracy was killed. There is no false equivalences to the rape, murder, torture, and all the truly horrible things that happened on October 7th, nor is there ever an excuse for any of the atrocities that happened in the 40s at the hands of the Nazis in Germany, Poland, and in other places. There is no explaining it away. But at the same time, it is not any justification for behaving in equally reprehensible ways. Right? So that is that's kind of that false equivalence paradigm that is sometimes constructed by Benjamin Netanyahu. And this is the leader that, by his actions, was certain that more IDF soldiers would die and more hostages would die in custody of Hamas. Now, again, the fact that Hamas had them in custody, they kidnapped them and tortured them and kept them alive in horrible conditions. But if Netanyahu had negotiated something, he could have had more live hostages home. That's pretty much beyond dispute from anybody that reads anything. You know, New York Times, not always the top of the pops in Tel Aviv. If you read the Bible, you read Torah, whatever. Not always great, but what is indisputable is that Bibi Netanyahu was trying to keep himself out of prison, and the delaying tactics that he used cost the lives of IDF soldiers and Israeli citizens that were held captive in Gaza. So, you know, he's your guy. I didn't vote for him because I'm not an Israeli. I just spitting out some facts. I'm not getting controversial on Bibi because everybody knows, including Israelis, if they look at themselves in the mirror and ask the right questions, honestly, they can celebrate his part in eliminating part of a threat in Iran. Great. Will that ever compensate in the hearts and minds of the Israeli families that lost loved ones on October 7th when the failures of the security and military in Israel allowed that to happen? And that is Netanyahu never taken responsibility for it. Just as he has never criticized, as I brought up before, never criticized uh, Donald Trump's parole and pardon of CZ, the founder of Binance, who helps to finance Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and ISIS and other terrorist groups. That this guy is their money guy, and Netanyahu knows that, knew that funding was happening even before. I mean, because he didn't know about October 7th, the plan, but he knew that this man was a conduit, right? Unfortunately, Netanyahu is beholden to Donald Trump, much as Trump is beholden to Putin. And in a funny way, Putin is beholden to Xi, right? That's just the way that the world works, and it's not all cotton candy and popcorn. So, yeah. So there is the good, the bad, and the ugly, in perhaps all in Bibi Netanyahu's house. There is Donald Trump. There is Vladimir Putin. There is our dear President Zelensky, who fights on honorably, even as he battles a substantial corruption scandal in the midst of a war, in the midst of prosecuting a war, and then spending the rest of the night with your war fighters trying to figure out ways how to defend against, how to countermand the attacks from the Russians. So he's got a busy schedule. So we appreciate him for fighting the corruption transparently. None of that happening here. And appreciate him for doing his part to defend democracy. Very little of that happening here too. So, thank you. Wish you all a beautiful day. This was Thursday. This was Corrupt Connections, the spanning the globe, which is a callback for those of you as old as I am or older. That's a callback to Jim McKay, Wide World of Sports. Before there was an ESPN, there was a weekly show that kind of got you caught up on the sports world in general, because back then there were only 3 channels, right? And newspapers, back when I could actually see well enough to read them. I love newspapers. I was, because of my dear father, who was kind enough to shell out for 3 or 4 a day, something like that, between office and home. And I'll leave you with one delight, which ties in a way to our corrupt connections. Venezuela. We didn't even talk so much about Cuba. We will in a broader context, because it's near and dear to my heart, because I lived in South Florida 25 plus years, and have proud to have lots of friends that were born in that country, some that still live in that country. And my real connection is Venezuela, as a dear man who was the most impeccable, wonderful host, was the now deceased father of my of my delightful ex-wife. And this man, when I lived in Venezuela, would take me to the newsstand. And a newsstand, you could see a newsstand like this, and this was 15 years ago, 16. Grand Central Station. In the days, I haven't arrived in sometimes Penn Station, but I don't I can't read them, so I'm not looking for newspapers. But without exaggerating, at this newsstand there were 15 different newspapers, maybe more, maybe a couple less, but a bunch. And the great part is that you could get one that was, yellow journal. You could get the reddest. That was at the time of that was when Hugo Chavez and Chavismo was in full effect in Venezuela, and so that was a socialist government, and so you could get one newspaper that was red hair on fire Chavismo, and then there weren't. I didn't see them, or I didn't search for them. There were a whole bunch of middle of the road kind of regular newspapers like was it El Siglo, Dario de las Americas. That's like a gringo U.S. version. Um, there was another whatever. There were bunches of them, right? And for somebody who's, I mean, my Spanish probably got better there because I still drank alcohol and I was reading Spanish newspapers and listening to news and listening to every song I was listening to was, you know, uh, immersion. So I was, and maybe I was younger and maybe my brain was more pliable. But just the delight of going there in a newsstand is more than that. It is, it's the public square. And I would marvel at my dear father-in-law was a cardiologist who had a personal relationship with the entire community because he had either operated on somebody in your family or taught at the hospital your son or daughter, who is now a cardiologist in Caracas, or had gone on to do that somewhere else in the world. So he was a saint, internationally renowned and admired, and the sweetest human being that's ever walked the earth. And just to be able to, you know, could I at that time go, you know, cover to cover rapidly and get as much out of it as I could have back then from the New York Times? No. But another immersion story, and I'll leave you alone for the day. If, and nobody asks me, but if somebody did, I have a child who is now 10. What would you suggest, based on all of the education and all the schools that you went to and what you've learned in your life? What would you suggest as a young parent I would do to best prepare my child to be successful in the future? AI, you know, that's it's true, goes without saying. Easy answer. I'll just that is stipulated, right? So if I could design a program for somebody that is mid-adolescence, at a time when you can still learn, then I guess the most important parts, as far as what are the children are finding out now. What they thought they were going to need 5 years ago is not what they need now because of the rate of change, and it's unsettling to everybody. But you need the building blocks. Can you now purchase on a TikTok store for $25 a Bluetooth device that goes on your ear and allows you to have a conversation with an Uzbek if you just dropped into Uzbekistan? Yes, that technology is available. But there is something that our screen time, our the way we learn has changed. But learning is more than accumulating knowledge, particularly with the young kids. Obviously, there's a brain science part of it that I'm not qualified to comment on authoritatively. But what I know for sure is to prepare your brain for learning, you know, music and language are indispensable. My dear mother, at gunpoint, almost, had me in piano lessons. Did I want to put a helmet on and run into a wall, a tree, or another human, or all three? Yes. Yes, I wanted to do. I want to do that right now. Um, but no, we went a couple times a week and sat at Ms. one of them, Miss Havian's house, and under lock and key, and you took your lesson and you did you practiced your piano. Equally as important, and now because of the AI isn't going to teach you to play the piano. It's going to help you probably, but there's an ear, the whole tactile thing with the keys and the things that still humans can do that machines can't. The languages, I can't speak Russian. I know Russian. I know some. I've been studying it recently because of the amount of times I have to absorb data about Vladimir Putin. Latin, that language, the ancient language, is the root of, in part, 7 or 8 other languages. Romantic languages, just go on the easy side of the street. Latin is to Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, then into English. It works its way out, the circles, the concentric circles that work their way out. But if you could, and of course, when I was in college, my friends who were the real smart ones, the ones that remained smart and did fun things, they were taking Japanese back then, not Chinese, Japanese. That was only 45 years ago or so. Then it was Chinese, and it still is, and it will be. Chinese, Mandarin will be there. But there's something about the Romantic languages that is special, and if you encourage a child to learn Latin at a very young age, then he or she or he, will have a leg up later in life, because I can read. My French was the best of all the languages, all of my modern Romantic languages. My French was strongest 35, 40, decades ago. And then I learned Spanish later. I tinkered with Italian. I'm Portuguese curious. But if you put down, for me, on a giant screen now, everything, of course, I'm taking it in as audiobooks, right? Because this part doesn't work as well for that text thing. But for kids, you could all of a sudden be, somebody will drop an Italian magazine in front of you on a plane, and you're going to be able to get some of it if you have that grounding. You're going to understand. The verb tenses, do they change? Yeah, sure, whatever. But it's a wonderful thing, and just clicking another Bluetooth device on your ear, it ain't helping your brain. It's efficient, but we got all the efficiency we need in the world right now. We need the art and the development, as I was referring to, the younger cadre, that all of the steps that they're going to skip because of cell phones. How old am I? Smartphones and AI. All those jumps they're going to make. When you're making a jump, you're stepping over something, right? Instead of taking it step by step. The speed of the information, the expectations, what will our children or grandchildren be expected to do at work, if work even exists? All of those existential things, which are more for my Sunday show than for my Thursday corruptions. Yeah, so in that case, I've done the damage I can. No bright sunshine. It is, in fact, a neat little northern New England fun fact. It is 40 degrees cooler, 40 degrees on the Fahrenheit scale, cooler than it was yesterday when I was out here. So, thus, yeah. Pleasure always, and thank you. And we will tomorrow at some maybe an early one. We have DEI Fridays. Saturday, I'm going to go with that the Saturday stratagem. If that's to your liking, if it's not, you change the channel, and then we'll go on from there. So thank you, appreciate you all, and I'll do all of those restack, retweet, yeah, fresh. Like, subscribe, and thank you, and have a good night.